Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lecture 2. So this lecture is on data sampling and probability. So this is the first official content lecture of the course. We had Lecture 1, which was more of an introductory lecture. We just kind of talked generally about data science, why you might want to study it, what it is. We went through a fun demo. We talked about course logistics. And in this lecture today, we'll actually start diving into some ideas. Particularly, what we're going to talk about is this idea of sampling. So oftentimes our data comes from some sort of sampling process. So first of all, we need to talk about what sampling is, why we need to do it, what it means for samples to be biased. A lot of times you might see in the news or elsewhere this idea of a biased sample. It's kind of a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. Well, what does that actually mean? How can we quantify it? How can we define it? And how do we avoid such biases? Um, how do we design a good sample and a good survey such that we can limit our bias? Then we'll talk a little bit about what a sampling frame is. That's related to this notion of sampling. And then we'll get into some more mathematical background, particularly about probability. So probability will be a way to kind of quantify these ideas around sampling. So we can actually do like mathematical operations. And we'll just dive in a little bit in this lecture. We'll continue it in the next lecture, lecture 3. But we really won't get a chance to like give probability the full treatment that it deserves. So if you really like probability, you really like the part of this lecture and the next lecture, there's a whole host of other courses you can take that are completely devoted to probability. So anyway, before we dive into all that sampling stuff, I want to revisit this data science life cycle from lecture 1. Here it is again. You can see again the fact that it's not just a cycle. You can see the main cycle here, but also note the different paths you can take to kind of deviate from the cycle. And here it is. And what we're going to do, just to start out with, is we're going to go through a data science process that other people did and see how it relates to this data science lifecycle. So the question that some people came up with is, how many squirrels are there in Central Park in New York City? So Central Park is a very big park. It's in the middle of Manhattan, and there's tons and tons of squirrels there. And some people wanted to figure out exactly how many squirrels there were. They wanted to count every single squirrel in the park and come up with a number. So here, in this case, they're starting with a question. They haven't collected any data yet. They just had a question, and then they came up with the ideas as to how to go about obtaining data to answer this question. So the New York Times actually did a feature on this. There was a group of people out there counting squirrels. One of the journalists from the New York Times went and was part of this group for a little bit. This person actually went out and was counting squirrels. They were plotting them on a map, standing in a spot and counting squirrels, putting them on a map, writing down their features. How long are they? What color are they? What sounds do they make? Did they make a sound? And all that data was used to come up with an estimate. So you can see here, it says the question was originally posed by this group when this person discovered that no such number existed. Maybe this person went to look it up, was just curious one day and went to look it up and found out that no one had ever done this before. So they decided to do it themselves. So there's a nice little interactive which you can go through. I think the link is down here on this slide. And the number that they came up with was 2,373. And how they did this was, again, this group of people, they had them stand in different locations in the park and just count how many squirrels that they saw for some length of time. And then once they had all that data, they had all the data from all these different observers, they used this formula over here on the right, which was from a 1959 study about squirrels. And interestingly enough, if you are a Berkeley student, or maybe if you're not, maybe you're at some other institution, you can actually access this survey or this study through the library, and you can see the formula that they use to calculate to determine how many squirrels there were in Central Park. So this is this is the process. They went out, they asked a question, they collected the data. Then, because they had a really good idea about how they collected the data, they designed their whole procedure and whatnot. Um, they understood the data that they had. And then they used this formula here to take that data and arrive at an estimate for the total number of squirrels. So there are a couple things to point out with this. The first thing to realize is that this formula here, this p hat equals az over zero 0.6 pi sy squared, this is a model. This takes some data and again transforms that data into a statement. The number, there are 2,373 squirrels in Central Park. But the important thing to keep in mind is that models have assumptions. For example, you can see here highlighted in orange, in the original 1959 study, it says that they had a set of observation points, which they went to and to count the squirrels, and they were visited in sequence and 15 minutes were spent at each spot. Well, over here on the left, you can see a screenshot from the article. It looks like this person, when this person was out there doing the field work, this person spent 20 minutes in each spot. Yet they still decided to use this same formula from the study. Well, if so-and-so is spending 20 minutes at each spot, maybe that person might see more squirrels compared to the original study where they only spent 15 minutes at each spot. That's just something to keep in mind. Maybe this formula isn't perfect, considering the process that these people over here in the 21st century, considering the process that these people went through. Another thing to kind of note out is this 0.6 constant. You can see it's highlighted in blue down here. They came up with this number 0.6 because they said that, oh, you can only see 60% of what's around you. You'll only be able to see 60% of the squirrels that are within your range of vision at any given time. This number, it kind of appears to come out of nowhere. They just say, oh, it was believed. Believed by whom? Who came up with this number? Is 0.6 correct? Should they have used 0.7 instead? Should they have used 0.5? Should they have used something completely different? Maybe 0.6 was just completely off base. This is an assumption that they used that went into their model. And then these people, again, who just did this recently in Central Park, they just used the same formula and kind of just took it for granted. We can trust, I guess, that this 0.6 number makes sense. I mean, it seems reasonable enough, but we have to keep in mind that this is an assumption that was made, and it might not necessarily be true. So this slide here and this formula, it's all referring to this part, this arrow here in the data science life cycle. So again, they asked a question. They went out, did field work, and counted squirrels, obtaining the data. And then because they collected the data themselves, they had that procedure. They went from here to here. They knew the data that they had because they were the ones that collected it. And then they used that formula with the assumptions, with the implicit assumptions, to arrive at a count to calculate the number of squirrels in Central Park. So they came up with 2,373. But how do we know it's not 2,374, 2,372? Maybe they were off by even more than that. It's important to keep in mind that when we're building models and when we're doing data collection and sampling and so on, that our process, it might not be perfect. Like, we can try to do as well as we can, but there's no guarantee that what we do will end up being 100% correct 100% of the time. And I just wanted to illustrate that with this fun little example about squirrels in Central Park. So yeah, I guess in the next video, we'll start diving into the lecture.